Hello, everybody. Good morning on this rainy day, at least here in Belgium. And welcome to our live discussion on navigating artificial intelligence in contemporary society. I also very warmly welcome our two guest speakers. I'm really excited that you two are joining me today, and I would love to hear what you have to say. Steph Wright and Christoph Bretgeld. Good morning. Good morning. I will introduce you real quick and then we jump straight in. I am very happy that Steph Wright, the head of Scottish AI Alliance, is joining us this morning. Just to introduce Steph has a diverse background ranging from astrophysics to genomics in academia. Most recently, Steph led on Data Lab's efforts in support of the Scottish government in developing Scotland's AI strategy and is now leading the delivery of the strategy vision for Scotland to be a leader in trustworthy, ethical, and inclusive AI. She is also a co-founder of Diverse AI and was recognized as one of the 100 brilliant women in AI ethics in 2023 and one of the top 10 women in tech in Scotland in 23. So congratulations to that again, Steph. I am also very happy that Christoph Bretgeld is joining us this morning. Christoph is a co-founder of the Amsterdam-based company Skill Lab. Skill Lab clients include public and private organizations that help people find relevant jobs and education. While starting to work with refugees and migrants, the company today builds AI-enabled technology for a range of user groups in almost 30 countries. A very warm welcome to both of you. We normally start the discussion around definitions and what do we mean, but I think the topic has been broadly discussed, and I would really like to use the very limited time that we have this morning to dive straight into the topic, if that's okay for you. We have already a comment from one of the users, which I think it's a very good introduction. So I would just like to read the comment from Georgie that says, artificial intelligence tools can have a significant impact on communities, improving education systems, making learning more accessible, personalized, and inclusive. To achieve this, however, adult educators and teachers must be competent in the ethical use of AI tools. And this is already touching on a couple of things that we want to discuss in the next 45 minutes. So I would like to give the first question to you, Steph, and invite you to talk a little bit about what are notable instances of AI implementations that have a positive impact on individuals and communities.
Thank you very much. I can absolutely give you an example of that. I'll give you a very specific Scottish example. And a very recent one, not related to education, I'm afraid, but hopefully definitely related to positive impact on a community. In Scotland, there's an organization called the Citizens Advice Bureau. Essentially, this is a public advisory charity, and the way it works in Scotland, interestingly, it has the umbrella Citizens Advice Bureau of Scotland, but actually all 49 local bureaus are actually individual charities because they are specifically local to where they are, because local knowledge is absolutely key. And during COVID, they all shut, and therefore people weren't able to access this advice, and so they set up a Scottish-wide advice phone line to be a single point of access. But that was really problematic. Staff didn't want to staff this line, and most of the time, anyone who called for advice or help were told, okay, we're going to now, find the local person to get in touch with you, when what they really just wanted was advice then, instead of being routed to something else. So in Scotland, there's a program called CivTech, which is a innovation program that allows public sector organizations to set innovation challenges for the private sector to help them sort some of these problems. So it was one of the CivTech challenges for that year, and an organization called Poly AI won the challenge and helped use AI to actually they deployed AI on this line to immediately do that routing, and ultimately it meant that people got a response and was connected to their local resources in under a minute, whereas before it could take up to a day before they got a call, and then this obviously freed up staff from just manning calls coming in, going, oh, hold on, let me put you through to there. And it actually allowed them to be on the front line to actually help people during COVID. So I think that's a really, really prescient kind of example of how AI can help and impact local communities specifically, especially during a really difficult time when resources like Citizens Advice Bureau were needed more than ever by people, especially people who might not be digitally as digitally engaged and connected as we take for granted here. So yeah, so that's an example. I hope that's useful.
Absolutely. I saw that Christoph was nodding throughout your entire contribution. Christoph.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. If I think about notable instances, I mean, I firstly think that what they all have in common, similar to what Steph described, is that they look at a very concrete problem, often in their local communities, and then basically come up with AI as a means to an end to solve a very concrete problem. In 2019, we've been fortunate to win a global challenge, a Google AI Impact Challenge, that brought us together in a room full of startups from all over the world that did impact work with AI. And examples included a spin-off from a university in Colombia that used, say, satellite images to detect illegal mines. The problem that we don't have, say, in the Netherlands, but in Colombia, it's a huge issue, and they used AI to solve it. There was a company using NLP to basically improve crisis line support for people that have, say, suicidal thoughts and so on and so forth. And that really made an impact to the local communities. There's a company called Full Fact, which basically aids fact checkers, right, in the analysis to make it easier to check for truth. There was a company called Talking Points, using an AI to enable parent-teacher engagement. So there's 100 more companies I could list which do really, really cool things. They all start often at the local level with a very concrete problem they want to solve, and use AI as a means to an end to deliver better services, and think environmental protection, health, democracy, and of course, learning and employment support, for example, the space we're in. Countless examples, and very hard for me to limit it to a few. It's really local champions. Yeah.
Well, brilliant. Maybe I will just throw the ball right back at you, Christoph. Then, if you would like to talk more about concrete initiatives, what is it that you're currently working on in Skills Lab, and maybe what is the project AI for All about?
Yeah, thanks. So, as mentioned, also we started with a very concrete problem, and that is that we observed that title-based labor markets don't really work. At least they don't work for large parts of the population. The way we found this out was by looking very specifically, you mentioned it in your introduction, at refugees and migrants who struggle to connect to jobs and education. Many reasons why they struggle, but one of the reasons we identified in the early days was there's a high dependence on titles in labor markets. So if I say I was a key account manager and tell you in which company, and you know the company, you think you have an idea of what I did. If I tell you I was a key account manager and you never heard of the company, it might have been from a foreign country or a small shop you never heard of, you wonder what actually I was doing, right? And then job and education search becomes incredibly more complex. So the solution we thought about in that instance was, let's think in skills as, say, a carrier of information rather than titles. So which skills did I use, no matter if what it was in professional or informal experiences, carrying responsibilities, what describes me as an individual in terms of skills, right? Where do I want to go? What are the skills needed? And if there's a gap, and that gets us to the education piece, how do I best bridge this, right? And if I do this on the level of skills, for example, with taxonomies such as ESCO and so on and so forth, it's much easier and more transparent and more fair, and as we find, much more bias-free. The question was, how do we do this, right? So, and that's how we started working with AI, because we thought like that is a means to an end to help people quantify the skills they have, right? So instead of basically clicking through 20, 30,000 competences and trying to understand which one describe me, could AI help to navigate a user through this process? And the answer is yes, right? And still today, we really base on this approach. Turned out it's not only relevant for refugees and migrants, but for all types of people. With a distance to the labor market, people that are unemployed, people that are in transition phases. So yeah, working and building on this technology, we work with employment and education services around the world. Really, it's often the mission of, say, public entities to connect people with jobs and education, and then naturally we work with those. What we are very clear on is that we work with local organizations, often public ones, but also NGOs and so on, and we help them to deliver better services, right? And that means, and that gets me to what we do in AI for All, is you need to take the people along. And one of the problems we see in our work, and believe it or not, but there was a phase when we didn't mention that we use AI because it scared people, right? What we learned is that you need to take people along. You need to take counselors along, you need to take educators along, you need to take all types of stakeholders along and involve them in the process early, because if they don't know what is happening and they just read AI basically, they might be so unsure and so insecure about their role in distributing technology that they might not do it, or it slows the adoption and so on and so forth. So AI for All, which we're committed to with a range of partners, including the European Association for the Education of Adults, All Digital, and many more, really starts there and thinks of how can we engage teachers early on in the process so that they understand what AI is, what it does, which data it uses, where the data comes from, and so on and so forth, and basically helps them to develop a better feel and almost a participatory approach to using AI. And yeah, that's a very exciting one, the very essential one, because it's any AI is only as good as the adoption of the tools at the end of the day, and that's where really AI for All starts.
I really like that you put your focus with your projects and your work, but also how you just answered the question on inclusivity and how to get people from where they are and take them on board. So Steph, I know that your organization is also putting a lot of effort on being inclusive. What is it that you are working on right now concretely, and how do you ensure that inclusivity is on the front row of that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Definitely need to talk to you, Christoph, about AI for All for starters. but yeah, no, I mean, I think what we do, it comes from a slightly different perspective. Ultimately, we are the delivery body for Scotland's national AI strategy. And as mentioned in the introduction, the vision laid out in the strategy is that Scotland becomes a leader in trustworthy, ethical, and inclusive AI. So those three values are pretty much everything we do. You know, it's the lens through which we do all our work. But ultimately, in order to deliver on that vision, you know, how we do that is we're about empowering Scotland's people, supporting Scotland's organizations and businesses, and influencing policy that impacts Scotland. So we have lots of activities under each of those pillars. So in terms of, I guess, what current project we're working on, I guess there isn't anything current because everything's current. So it's a bit difficult, but absolutely agree, Christoph, that whole bringing people along with you on the journey is absolutely core to what we do when we develop the strategy and when we set out that vision. It's, you know, it's a firm belief, you know, in the AI Alliance that's AI has the potential to positively transform everyone's lives, but it needs to be everyone's lives and not just the few. And it's ensuring that, you know, everyone is along with us on this journey to a shared AI future. And that is very much an approach we take. We have a lot of programs running concurrently. So relevant ones, I suppose, to this discussion is we have developed a course called Living with AI. It's an AI literacy program. Essentially, it's free, open to the public. And it gives you the fundamentals of what AI is, what AI isn't, and then takes you on a journey to understand how AI impacts your everyday lives. It's not about how to do AI. It's nothing technical. It really is about giving people foundational knowledge to what AI is, because I think without that, it will be difficult for people to constructively and critically contribute to conversations around AI. It's really, really important to ensure that people have a base level of knowledge, because quite often people dive into, public consultations, but not actually equipping the public with the knowledge to, properly contribute to that. I always cite the example of Brexit, asking a whole country about Brexit, and no one really understood what it was, right? So, I mean, that's obviously a very extreme case, but if we want to bring people along with the journey, we have to empower them with the knowledge to be able to contribute to the conversation. So Living with AI, we've had 2 cohorts run, and it's been really, really successful. So, but it's currently on hiatus because we're going to try and develop it on our own platform, because we hosted it on a platform called Canvas. I don't know how familiar people are with that. It's one used by universities, etc., which is perfectly great for university MOOCs. But if you're trying to create an engaging online learning experience for the public, it has its limitations. I mean, you really aren't allowed to change much of the aesthetics. And I think aesthetics actually really matters when you're trying to engage people that otherwise, aren't forced to learn about AI, if you know what I mean. So we're trying to develop our own platform on a very simple thing on a website, so that people can access that. So we hope to relaunch that later this year. But just in parallel to that, we actually have a very active community participation and engagement program. So it's not just about outreach, not just about going out there telling people what AI is. We're going out to communities to listen, to find out what AI means to them. And, we spent the first part of our strategy delivery doing a lot of the outward communication, going out to speak to people, local communities, local groups, even like groups of teachers, etc., all going, what is this AI thing? And we're going out there to have to talk to them about it, to help them cut through the noise, because I think that's really important. There's so much noise, there's so much hype, and we're just there to
panic.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, key messages we always put out there is, AI is not magic. It's not, people are treating it like a solution looking for a problem. You need to understand your problem before you even think about AI as a potential solution. And, it's not magic. It's not one technology as well. That's the other thing we find that people always think, because they consider AI as a single entity, and things like existential threat and all that. We try and address all that, but we're moving from outreach to actually closing the loop and making sure it's proper engagement and participation, so that we're actually listening and taking back what communities, what people are telling us that they're worried about. We have a very successful project going on at the moment. It's a 2.5-year project in collaboration with the Alan Turing Institute. Don't know if anyone's familiar with it, in the UK, and the Children's Parliament, which is a children's rights-based children's engagement center. And we've been working with 9 to 11-year-olds in primary schools across Scotland to find out what matters to them when we start talking about AI. And it's like going out to them, to their schools spread out over Scotland, and getting them to tell us what they want to hear more about AI, and tell us what their concerns are. And the key themes that came out of phase 1 was AI in education, safety and bias, and things like that. So we invite the children to then come to our annual conferences and tell our audience of AI practitioners, these are the learnings, these are what they're concerned about. And that's kind of continuing, and we hope to create a series of resources to help any organizations looking to get feedback and input from children on how to do that properly. But
That
anyway,
is actually that. No, but this is brilliant, because you were actually already touching upon a question that we got on Facebook from Ikram Noor, and they're asking, how would AI impact on teaching profession and on students? Steph, you briefly touched that topic. Do you maybe want to say another 2 sentences to that?
I think it will absolutely impact the teaching profession and student. And I think anyone thinking otherwise is either burying their head in the sand or just, not really sure. But it already is, I think, for a lot of people. I think there's no easy answer to this, though, because the teaching profession has the challenge of actually upskilling teachers to really understand what AI is. And before you need to do that before you talk about how they can use AI in teaching. And then obviously there's all the challenges around students using, the news likes to hook on to students cheating and stuff like that. But I'm like, that surely isn't what we should be focusing on. We should be focusing on, look, there's this brilliant technology, and when people talk about it, they tend to talk about the Gen AI's impact on teaching and student. But Gen AI isn't the only type of AI that can impact teaching profession. AI can create really bespoke, personalized learning journeys for students, which will be really, really brilliant, especially if, in schools that are under-resourced, that don't have enough teachers to give that attention to each individual student. Or it can enable more people to access education as well. But it tends to get, kind of clouded over by they're using Gen AI to write essays and cheat, kind of thing. Because I think you need to look at everything with balance. There's obviously,
Absolutely.
poor uses, great
Steph,
uses.
Steph, you don't have a simple answer. I'm very disappointed. So
I'm
I'm
sorry.
gonna. I will
know.
just do Christoph not a favor and ask him for a simple answer.
On the question in the comment,
Yes.
how AI will impact teaching professions. I can only echo what Steph is saying. Unfortunately, I see way more upside than downside. I think it will be radical if it is not already. Yes, there might be a little bit of a catch-up thing, and you hear about these stories of people using, I don't know, generative AI for things they shouldn't, or so. But at the end of the day, I think it's also getting used to technologies, and I think if you derive a utility, if it makes life more effective and efficient, it's also the education systems that needs to catch up and thinking of what does it mean, right? Of how do we get things done in the future, maybe differently, and that requires a whole new discussion on which skills do we need to navigate this AI-driven world. But I'm very optimistic about this, to be honest. Yeah,
that's good. I think we have to be optimistic and not let the
Can
panic.
I just add a wee point? Sorry. Just another thing is, there's a lot of conversations about how AI will change the skills that are required of people going into the workforce. But I always caution against that narrative, because we need to ensure that we are not enabling a future generation that blindly accepts what a computer tells them to be correct. Because we need to still ensure that people have enough critical thinking, analytical skills, problem solving skills to, when Copilot produces a presentation for you, that if something is wrong, you can spot it instead of going, oh, well, Copilot did that, it must be right. Or, or ChatGPT told me that, it must be right, because it isn't. and it's just ensuring that we don't fall into this trap of that myth that computers are infallible, that they're always right, because they're not at all.
Oh, absolutely. And that perfectly plays into the next question that I was thinking about, is that how can AI remain adaptable and responsive to our different societal needs? Because in the end, it still comes back to the person. As you just said, Steph, the starting point should be the person, and they should be able to spot things. But how can we assure that then, in this case, AI remains adaptable?
AI as a field to remain adaptable to different
so there's strategies. If we implement AI strategies, how do we make sure that they remain adaptable and responsive to our societal needs?
I think from a starting point, ensuring that you actually have diversity of opinion in the development of them, that you actually have diversity and inclusion at the core of the development of them, so that it's not always a one-sided, kind of perspective on this is the strategy that we're going to have. But the truth is, all strategies should be adaptable. It shouldn't be written in stone, and especially any technology strategy has to be adaptable. And and ensuring that if say you set up a strategy, you thought you got everyone that was needed to have their voices heard around the table, and you created a strategy, and then once you deploy it, you realize, oh, hold on a minute, we forgot to think about that particular case, then go and get people from that particular use case and come and make sure you listen to how that impacts them. I think everyone views strategies as like this solid thing, but really they should be adaptable, they should be flexible, because nothing stays static. Everything's always changeable and different, and it's that willingness to be adaptable, I think, is really, really important as well. That is not we set this 5 years ago, therefore this is the way we're still going to do it. We undertook a review of our strategy last year because we realized we're now entering year 4 of delivery out of 5. Last year 3 was the middle, so we thought, hey, let's look back to see if what we thought about, that started in 2019, the development is still valid today, and half of it isn't, kind of thing. And it's kind of being adaptable and changing for that. But I don't know, over to you, Christoph, any thoughts?
No, I think for us it's really form follows function, right? I mean, a strategy should respond to a problem, right? And if you get the problem wrong, you get the strategy wrong, or it doesn't really follow it. And I think what we see a little bit, you mentioned that earlier, is that sometimes you have the perception, at least, that it's AI for the sake of AI. But it's really a means to an end. I can't overstate this enough, right? It's really the moment you understand what the problem is and you compare various solution approaches and you identify AI as a winning strategy or approach, or how you want to frame it, that's key. And then the other thing is keeping the human in the loop always, because that's the worst that can happen, is that you at some point forget to involve the humans in the feedback loop also for AI, and just always like building on assumptions over assumptions over assumptions. So keeping humans in the loop, co-design, we mentioned that earlier, involving stakeholders and stakeholders, especially from the local ecosystem. And this ecosystem needs to be empowered, right? They need to be in a position where they understand what they do, and also, and I think that's very important, what they bring. And we always speak about AI, but the ingredient of AI is data. Right, and the data comes from the people, from the communities. It's often structured through organizations that operate already. So if you really want to do something great, you depend on great data. And I think, as I totally agree with you, Steph, I think not everybody needs to become a data scientist, but people should understand what AI needs in order to operate well, and what it has to do with basically their input, right? So as a user of something, I'm a decision maker as well, right? I consent to my data being used by a certain system for a certain purpose. And I need to really, if you want, so strengthen this muscle of understanding of where do I give data for an AI to do a certain thing, and what happens to that data. And so as a user, so to speak, I'm always or should be always in control of what happens with tools around me.
Actually, you have already mentioned it a little bit, but Christoph, I would like to ask you one follow-up thing, because we already learned that you're working with migrants a lot. So in this regard, how do you make sure that your AI initiatives address the unique requirements of marginalized communities, so that there is some sort of accessibility and equality?
Yeah, good, very good question. So, I mean, I think the answer has to do with any service design, right? No matter if it's a technological artifact or any other services you provide, it's testing, right? It's co-designing. It's really, especially in the case of refugees and migrants. I wasn't a refugee migrant. I didn't have that experience. And the only thing you can do is be very rigorous about how you test, how you derive information, how you basically derive conclusions from this. And that is something which we see going wrong all of the time. You really need to discipline yourself to say, like, I'm not the user, I'm not the problem owner. Sometimes people are, sometimes they are not. But we see this, for example, with clients, with education and public employment services. You have a room full of decision makers that try something and say it doesn't work for me, but they're not the audience, right? And that's very, very important, and requires lots of discipline to understand, like, this was built for somebody in a different position, and it's methodology. It's really co-design practices, general design practices that we need to respect, and that's professionals. I think I don't want to say we're more of a design company than an AI company, but maybe. I think it's really the design, right? It's really the adoption and the testing and challenging of the testing, and it's a never-ending story. Yeah.
But I think that goes very well with a quote that we got from a user. Christoph, let me know if you agree with that. It's from Chantal, and she says, AI isn't just about cutting edge technology. It can be a way to empowerment and inclusion if used correctly, inclusively, and strategically.
Yeah,
Absolutely,
yeah.
100% agree. And just to say, Christoph's point about co-design, so important. And I've always said that lived experience needs to be considered on par with other forms of expertise, because it's always seen as an afterthought or not considered at all, kind of thing. So I think lived experience is just as important as the ability to code, the ability to, analyze data, because ultimately there are very few people or very few companies that are creating products for a tiny section of society that they don't need to include wider points of view from other lived experience. And the fact is that most people aren't engaged on that at all. So it's always about, how do you make sure you involve, people with different forms of lived experience.
Absolutely. And I actually would love to surprise ask you with something, which I always do in my live discussions and podcasts. And I did not communicate that before because I want a spontaneous and honest answer. So I'm going to be your fairy godmother, and I grant you one wish in your area of AI development to make it more accessible and just for all. What is it that you wish for? Christoph, you're looking very overwhelmed. Steph, you're looking very happy about that question. What would you wish for?
Well, we're talking about hypotheticals, right? A fairy godmother and all that, but I think focusing on AI is not the way. I think the if we could do one thing is to eradicate digital poverty and ensure everyone has equal access, to digital, services, etc. And because it's all well and good for us to sit here and talk about AI and data and stuff when, we have this in Scotland. We have rural areas that don't have broadband connection, and there we are going, hey, so what do you think about AI? And they're like, we can't even connect to the internet. So, it's that kind of, I think if everyone had high-speed, equitable access to the internet, I think that would be amazing. And I mean everyone, all over the world, because I think that would be the foundation to eradicate a lot of the inequalities that we deal with in the world of digital poverty. Is something that people never talk about, or not talk about enough anyway. So yeah, that's my wish. So fairy godmother, please make it happen.
Yeah, we'll see what I can do. Christoph, what would be your wish?
I would actually pick up a point Steph made earlier, and that is education. And I mean general education, the ability to critically think, to question, to understand, not necessarily to build, but to be part of the discussion, right? And I think wherever AI is going, if it doesn't take people along, it will create problems. And I think everybody needs to be educated enough to be part of the discussion moving forward, right? And that makes it inclusive, that makes it also sustainable in the long run, and won't, or prevents basically fragmentation, so to speak, of people understanding it and not understanding and being part of it or not, and feeling used or not or included. So I think it's really critical thinking, interest, curiosity, basic understanding, and that has to do with education, and that's the job of all of us really to convey that. So that would be a great condition to start from.
I would actually like to ask you a question that we got from our users, if that's okay for you, because it kind of like goes smoothly about what we just talked. We talked about biases and inclusion. Now, Ania was asking, how do you address and mitigate potential biases in the AI algorithm to ensure fair and equitable job recommendations for job seekers or unbiased answers advice to those who use AI-powered digital tools. So going into the algorithm itself and not talking so much about communities.
So just to clarify on the Citizen Advice Bureau case in Scotland, that the AI tool wasn't giving the advice. The AI tool was to connect people contacting the service to local advisors quicker. So it was kind of a call triaging and call efficiency application of AI. The AI is not giving advice to people. So so just to clarify that. But in terms of mitigating potential biases, it goes back to what Christoph was saying. It's ultimately it's all about data, and it's about how you ensure that you have as representative a data set feeding whatever AI algorithm there is, and in order to do that, is ensure that you have as diverse input as possible, in the development stage. Or you can argue from a even making sure you have a human rights approach to how you develop algorithms, and ensuring right at the start, because it's much harder to fix once it's already been done, and created. But yeah, over to you, Christoph.
Yeah, I mean, if I reflect on what we do, is we don't use, and that's very important. I mean, we find this ethically very important. For example, we don't do black box matching, right? We don't say, we have an idea of who you are and here's what you should do. What we do basically is use AI, for example, to help people profile their skills, and they can review them. And that's very important with keeping humans in the loop, right? So I can say, hey, you didn't ask me that question, but it would change the outcome of for example, the recommendations for jobs and educations. So let me add this. So we're trying always to give the user a chance to say, hey, we try to help you to shortcut this process, but if you want to add something, here's what we use for these recommendations, for example. You want to add to this, right? And make it transparent. In the design of the technology, include as many steps as possible for users to review what you're using for the next step, right? So they can understand this as an aiding mechanism more than an assumption mechanism, and that's very important in how we perceive basically bias-free application, right? To say it really needs to be transparent as possible at all parts of the journey, and that's what we're trying to incorporate.
Great. I am actually having another question from the community. People seem to be very interested about concrete advice from your side. So if there's anything you would like to share with the community in terms of concrete resources, everything you mentioned, all the projects, we will be sharing with the users in the comment section and also after the live discussion, so they will be able to look at your sources and your projects. But there was a concrete question from Ingrid. As a teacher, we have had many conversations with my students about AI, which is good, I assume. I would like to know if there are out some reliable resources about how to talk to children about AI. I don't know if you spontaneously have any resources you would like to share in this regard. If not, we will do that after the live discussion. From EPALE's side, but is there anything you would like to refer to the
specifically around children? I link that to the project. Obviously, we're working with children. It is phase 3 of our project, which is developing these reliable resources, and we plan to actually develop a version of our Living with AI course for schools. And so there's that, and also we also have a Scottish AI playbook, which is a guide for how we do AI in Scotland. So it outlines our values, our principles, and then has specific resources for particular audiences. That's something we're working on right now, and we have talked about creating a Scottish AI playbook for children, so that they are empowered with the knowledge they know at the, for at age appropriate information and resources for them. But right now, I mean, there's a lot of stuff out on the internet, and there's actually quite a lot of decent stuff around on the internet. But the one thing, I don't know if you noticed this, Christoph and Christine, but there has been a shift away from the narrative about AI, where everyone used to define AI as doing things that humans do, or or human intelligence is required to do. but especially since the OECD updated their definition of AI at the end of last year, there tends to be a shift now that we're removing those references to humans, and just saying, actually, AI is a machine system that takes inputs, you give it instructions, it produces outputs, because really that is what it actually is. And I hope that that shift also translates to conversations with children. I went into my daughter's school a couple of weeks ago. I was invited to go in and talk about AI at their STEM group, and it was ranging from 5-year-olds to 11-year-olds. And so the 5-year-olds were just like, oh, what was she talking about? But it's just that, it's incredibly difficult to, tailor, because children, a 5-year-old is very different from a 9-year-old and a 10-year-old, and it's just ensuring that there are kind of age appropriate resources out there. And that's something we're working with, co-designing with children. That's the really important thing.
I did it. I talked and I was muted. I did it. And I'm so close to the end of the discussion and I still did it. Christoph, do you want to add to that?
No, just to echo Steph's last point, it's age appropriate. I'm a father myself, and I see, like, with every year of age that is added, so to speak, the perception changes and explanations need to change. So nothing to add to that.
Absolutely. So I think this is a very nice wrapping up of our discussion. I learned a lot. We talked about communities, we talked about tailoring, we talked about including the target group and not let the tool become a means in itself. It is obviously something that we should use to our advantage and not the other way around, that we always have to re-evaluate and reassess and check on ourselves and what we're working on and how we're defining things. So thank you so much for giving me a brief insight into the great work that you're doing, obviously also quite successful. So thank you very much for that. Like I said, all the things that we have mentioned, all the websites, the project, everything will be listed in the comments below and in the description of the discussion. But Steph, Christoph, thank you so much for joining me from your countries. We all meet here. Thankfully, we don't meet here in person because the weather is very Belgium today. So I hope you have better luck with the weather. But thank you very much. And the discussion in written form will continue today until 4 p.m. I would invite you warmly to maybe pop in and see if people have questions for you or comments, because you said a lot of very interesting things and I wasn't able to mention all the comments that we have in the comment section, but please have a look and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Christoph, Steph, bye.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.